and welcome to our event, which is titled Sharing Good Practice, Focusing on Farmers and Nature, Promoting Success and Looking Forward. I don't intend to unduly hold up proceedings with a long speech, as we have exciting and inspirational speakers to listen to this morning, with a variety of practical examples where farmers and crofters are working collaboratively with nature to produce in a sustainable way the food that we all eat. This is an extremely opportune moment in time to hold this seminar as we prepare to enter very shortly into a period of some uncertainty and anxiety, not only for farmers and crofters and land managers, but also for environmental agencies, following on from the relative security of the Common Agricultural Policy and the European Environmental Legislative Framework. I want to put on record here that Scottish Natural Heritage recognise and applaud the huge and influential role that our farmers and crofters and land managers play in the protection and maintenance of Scotland's world-famous landscapes and wonderful wildlife. Without them, it simply would not exist as we see it today. I very much believe that not only do we have in Scotland skilled agriculturalists, but we also have agriculturalists who value nature and recognise the value of working with nature to achieve a balanced and sustainable working environment that contributes positively to the economy of Scotland. I believe that we have the resilience and the capacity within our agricultural and environmental agencies not only to resist any regression, but also to maintain and enhance our position on the European and international stage. I would now like to introduce to those of you who have not previously met her, and I'd be very surprised actually if you have not, as she can be seen cycling all over Scotland most days, our Chief Executive of Scottish Natural Heritage, Nature.Scot, Francesca Ozowska.
Good morning, everyone. As Ian said, I'm Francesca Ozowska. The relatively new, I'm still wondering about how long I can get away with the relatively new term Chief Executive of Scottish Natural Heritage. I've been in post since October last year. I think I've got another few weeks of the relatively new thing to go on. And it's great to see so many people here. I'm really pleased that so many of you have been able to make the journey for this important. Oh, I forgot to do my thing. Sorry, person, can you help? For this really important event on sharing good practice. I attended the NFUS conference dinner earlier in the year, and it was a great event. And those of you who were there possibly still have sore heads from it. But I went to that event not having had a lot of exposure to agriculture and farming issues, and I was a little bit trepidatious about what I might hear. I know that environmental issues and farming don't always go hand in hand, and I knew that Terry Ahern, Chief Executive of SEPA, had been speaking earlier in that day, and those of you who know Terry know that he's pretty forthright and very entertaining. And so I kind of went to this event, and what really struck me was the mood in the room was a mood of optimism. And that's not to deny some of the challenges that we'll no doubt hear more about today, but there was a real optimism. People that kind of welcomed Terry's approach, and I heard from a number of the delegates that this was the most environmentally focused conference that the NFUS had had, and people thought that that was all the better for it. Now, there are challenges, that's not to deny that at all, but I was really heartened by the positivity in the room, and I'm sure that positivity will come through today. I'm sure that you will all have read our new corporate plan, Connecting People and Nature, cover to cover. But if not, I'll just give you a quick flavour of that. The clues in the title, Connecting People and Nature. Previously, you might have thought that SNH's focus was, completely on species, habitats and wildlife, and that is still absolutely our core business. But while fulfilling that remit to act as the government's advisor on those issues and caring for the environment, we increasingly in SNH see our role as to work with the people who actually manage nature. And that's you. And I'm really pleased to be here because by working with farmers, their advisors and partner organisations working with the farming community, we will achieve greater biodiversity benefits for all of us, and not just today, but in the longer term. Now, SNH has always had a strong role in supporting farmers in partnership with the Scottish Government. We obviously play a major role in delivery of the SRDP. We have 30 full-time staff dedicated to that programme, and it is a really key piece of work for us. In terms of future plans, we know there's a degree of uncertainty in terms of EU exit, and I'm sure we'll hear about that. But over the last few years, we have supported around 1,500 agri-environment agreements, which is worth over £150 million, which is quite staggering in terms of volume. What I'm really looking forward to today is actually hearing from 5 farmers who tell us about the amazing work that they do for nature on their farms and the benefits that they see as a result of investing in work which not only directly benefits the wider environment, but what I'm hoping to hear is about the twin benefits in terms of benefits to their business, but also benefits to that wider environment. And we will hear from them basically as soon as I shut up. Doesn't need me to tell you that around 3/4 of Scotland's land area is used for agricultural use. And so what farmers do on their land is vitally important for the future of nature. Those decisions that you're making day in, day out have really wide-ranging implications in terms of the future of Scotland's nature. And I think most people would acknowledge that farming practices have changed tremendously over the last 50 years, and that has led to many improvements in relation to agricultural productivity, which has had an impact on the environment and has led to kind of some challenges as we within SNH work with the farming community. But what will be heartening to hear about today is that actually I think the farming community itself has recognised some of these challenges, and the 5 speakers that we'll hear from will tell us about their journey in recognising that they want to do the right thing by their business, and I don't underestimate that you are running businesses, but want to do the right thing for nature to ensure that nature is here for the generations to come. Now, in a way, this is your event. SNH is hosting it, but really this is for you. I'm merely an interloper into this conversation, and SNH wants to listen to you and to understand from you what you've been doing to manage your farms for both profit and nature, and how you've done that with incentive schemes and perhaps without. We want to celebrate what can be achieved when farmers put the environment at the heart of their farming activity, and also to learn from you and be inspired by the case studies that we will hear about. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about the innovative work that is being done up and down the country, and how we might apply that to kind of future policy decisions which are kind of live at the moment in relation to the future of farming in Scotland. As I mentioned earlier, this is a time of some uncertainty, but one thing we know is that whether we live in Glasgow or Gairloch, Edinburgh or Elgin, the services and the businesses that you run will deliver a healthy and resilient environment. So I'm hoping that all of us today can have a shared vision for farmers and crofters continuing to work the land, playing a vital role in our rural economy and society, but also contributing positively to maintaining and enhancing our habitats and species. So without further delay, I am going to make way for our first speaker, Farm Manager David Aglan of Balburney Estates, who's going to introduce us to regenerative agriculture and what he has been doing in Central Fife. So, David, over to you. Thanks very much.
Morning, everybody. My name is David Aglan, Farms Manager at Balburney Home Farms. We are a large farming, family-owned farming business in Central Fife, as already described. One delegate here introduced me to another earlier as a bad farmer from the east. We are predominantly an arable business. We farm 1,200 hectares of land. I am not the owner, I'm the manager. It's been owned by the Balfour family since 1642, and the next generation has just taken over at the start of the year. We have 750 hectares of combinable cropping, 150 hectares of vegetables and potatoes, including cabbages, cauliflowers, carrots, sometimes parsnips. And we also have 300 hectares of grass of varying quality and altitude, which supports 250 suckler cows, and we finish all the progeny. On top of the 1,200 hectares, we have 350 hectares of commercial forestry. Our soils are predominantly sandy loams, which, again, for those in the room who understand, that's what allows the vegetable production. We're on the south side of Howard Fife, which is a vast area of very fertile land, and we have packing company Kettle Produce based in the area, so there's a lot of demand for vegetable production in the area, and the land can support that. Our altitude, we go all the way from 200 feet above sea level right up to nearly the top of the East Lomond Hill, which is 1,250. And so we've got heather on the hill and some of the best arable land down at 200 feet, all within a distance of 6 miles. So it's quite a big range of what we've got. I'm here to talk about regenerative agriculture today. Now, what is regenerative agriculture? Now, I looked up Google, and it came up with something about farming without pesticides and such, and I thought I didn't really like that, so I just scrubbed that. I thought I'm not going to use that as my definition. How I like to describe it is building soil, improving the soil, improving its structure, its ability to produce, and increasing its workability, and at the same time working with nature rather than fighting it. You know, nature always wins. It doesn't matter whether it's a chemical out of a bottle, an antibiotic. You know, water always wants to flow downhill no matter what you do. We're going to be much better off if we can work with it rather than challenge it too much. And we see that, you know, resistance to antibiotics, the pesticides we're using, they last a few years and then it doesn't kill the weeds, it doesn't control the diseases, etc. Same with livestock. We've got to learn to work around it and work with it together. Where are we on this journey of regenerative agriculture? We're just at the start, really. We're just at the very start. I've always been a believer in looking after the soil ever since I was a wee boy. You know, that's where the money comes from. They're not making any more of it. If you punish it too much, as I said, nature will fight back and it will defeat you. So we started off with moving to lighter, smaller tractors on the farming area that we have, so that we just reduce soil compaction, and that made a huge difference to our cropping, saved some money as well. The next thing we did about 7 years ago, we stopped. Gosh, I'm not sure what that was. We stopped sowing tram lines in the fields. So this field's about 500 metres top to bottom, and it rises 150 feet from top to bottom. So it's quite a steep slope. And this picture was taken in February, I think, last year. Now, normally, if if we'd put tram lines in the field, the soil would have washed down that hill over the winter. You can't stop it. It's just nature's way. But because we've got crop growing in that tram line, and we've got satellite steering technology on most of our tractors now, we can put the tram lines in when we need to work in the field, as has been done here. But there's still a crop growing there, and you will notice there's no soil wash in that field at all. I mean, usually there'd be a big muddy wet bit at the bottom of the hill there, but there's none at all. There's nothing. It hasn't moved, and it'll stay like that most of the season. It does cause one or two issues at harvest in that we've got a lot of greens in the tram line, so it slows the combine down a little bit. But we've taken a conscious decision to do that, and we deal with it. But you've got to get your head around it. You've got to want to make it work. You'll see here, this is a field just sown recently. That picture was taken on Sunday night, this week just past. That's a field of spring oats just come through. This is another of our soil health initiatives. We've taken the route of trying some direct drilling. We spent £70,000 buying a brand new direct drill. It was the first one of its type in Scotland, and that was 2016 we bought that. And I did some direct drilling down in the south of England many years ago with great success, and thought, yeah, we'll come to Scotland and we'll do it and it'll be grand. And we've succeeded, but we've had some spectacular failures as well. And when the failures happen, they're expensive. Just as an example, last year we no-tilled most of our spring barley and about 50% of our wheat, and it's cost us £80,000 in lost revenue as a result, because the crops were not as they should have been. So it needs to be borne in mind that listening to all the good ideas about what's the best way to look after your soil and the ideal way to do things, if it works, and I'm one that wants to make it work and always have done, even I can fail at it, and it's costly. That's really costly. I mean, that sort of money could stop some farming businesses. We're lucky we're large enough, we've taken a big gulp, and yeah, it's a bit painful, put it that way. We'd been better off if we hadn't bought the machine at all and just carried on ploughing everything and doing what we're doing quite considerably. But the main point about this photograph is when it works, it's fantastic. You can't beat it. And the savings are there. That's one pass with the drill, shut the gate, job done. It's brilliant. The crop's all there. That's going to yield well. I've no worries on that front at all. So these are one or two of the things we've been trying. The other thing, regenerative agriculture really requires, I think in my mind, livestock to be integrated back into arable systems. Our farm has, like a lot, has become very polarised. In other words, the livestock are always on the same fields of grass every year, and they're grass because they're not convenient to plough up. They're a bit stony, a bit steep, what have you. And the arable land has been predominantly the same fields every year, which haven't seen livestock for years, and the fertility is suffering whilst the fertility is building on the other end of the estate. So we are going back to trying to outwinter cattle. Luckily we've got sand enough ground, a lot of it we can hopefully do this. And our first trial of it was this winter just been, and we had 150 cows outside until the new year, grazing kale and fed bales of silage, and that worked. The stockmen weren't too keen. They liked the tractors, they liked the around the shed, but we managed to persuade them that it could be done sensibly. We're also using cover crops as part of our greening. All of our greening is green cover crops sown in the autumn, and that's allowing us to put livestock on in the spring before those fields go back into crop, which again is recycling the nutrients that the cover crops have drawn out of the ground over the winter, putting it back in so we can potentially cut fertiliser application the following year, and just building a bit of biology and goodness and structure in the soil. Obviously not all soils are suited to keeping livestock outside the winter, so it's not everybody has that option, and we're fortunate. 5 minutes, right. Livestock, this is my next mad, which my neighbours think I'm potty. That's a field of wheat, picture taken in February, Field was sown in September, came away lush and strong after a good crop of tatties last year, and thought, well, we'll put the sheep on it and let them to graze it down. But growth regulator, early fungicide, you know, take the disease leaves away. We did it with a field of oats the previous year. It was the best yielding crop on the place. I didn't have time to take a photograph of that field today, but it looks fantastic. It's knee-high, strong, thick, as it should be. So yeah, again, this is really integrating the livestock and the arable together. But we don't have the sheep; they come down from a hill farm at Optorada for the winter. So you know, you don't have to have your own livestock if these are things we want to try. This picture was put in to see if anybody was awake and had been listening to what I've been saying. That's a field of spring barley, again, taken recently. What's odd about that field for the farmer? Anybody in here?
No tramlines.
Yeah. It's unfortunate it's a flat field, so yeah, there's not a lot of soil erosion in that field anyway. But that's the field taken more or less from the same spot. That's where those cows were grazing that kale that you saw there. Same field, same spot. Sown late, obviously this year with a bad spring, but it's coming away nicely. It's great. We've min-tilled that, kept all the organic matter in the top few inches of the soil. The worm life in that field is amazing. You dig down and you get 10, 15 worms in a spadeful every day of the year. It's incredible. The unfortunate is we'll wreck it next year sowing carrots. So that is a problem. Vegetable production is difficult. How do we grow vegetables and look after our soil? I haven't cracked that one yet. We're trying a few things, but it's a long way off, I think. The public want the vegetables, we've got to grow them if we want to make money. This is how extreme you can get. This is direct drilling. That's a cover crop, mixed cover crop sown last July, after a crop of rye for an AD plant, which came off early. Cover crop grew away, it was about knee high, and we just went straight in with a no-till drill. That's sowing a crop of oats on the 20th of September last year, and on the 9th of November that field looked like that. So again, when it works, it's fantastic, and that field looks tremendous today. That's a flavour of what we're trying, but I really want to stress the point of we spent a lot of money trying to do this. We've bought huge tyres for the tractors, we've invested in the technology, the drill cost a fortune, we've still got our old seeding system too, and it doesn't always work. So we need to be careful what policies we push forwards as to being the answer. As I want it to work, and I can still fail. If growers who don't want it to work, they'll just make it not work, and the industry will go backwards very quickly. We are seeing huge increases in wildlife. The Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust are doing surveys on us just now, and we've got all the wildlife you want. Grass strips everywhere to do, all around the place. There's, last year's stubble is still there, so it's nothing's disturbed. So there's the wildlife's just going up and up and up, which is a win on that side of things. The soil travels better, our fields are draining better as a result of it when it works. But again, when it doesn't work, it's costly. So that's it, it's a flavour. There's so much to talk about, but that's a 15 minutes, I think, isn't it?
David, thank you very much for finishing on time and the fascinating look at regenerative agriculture. I'm interested in the fact that you're moving to taking your cattle outside, which is completely the opposite to what is happening in the west coast where I am on Tyree, where the move is towards wintering cattle. So I'll talk to you about that. Our next speaker is Bryce Cunningham from Mossgiel Farm. So welcome to Bryce.
Hi everyone, my name is Bryce Cunningham. I'm a dairy farmer at Mossgiel Farm down in Ayrshire. So a little history of the farm, something rather interesting, and it's all to do with that man up the front. That is Robert Burns, the Scottish poet from the 1700s. And the fascinating thing is that Robert was actually farming Mossgiel just about the time he became famous, way back in 1786 or 1787. And some people believe that he'd written some of his most influential and most personal poems there. He also, interestingly to me, he also kept a diary of his time at Mosgiel. And one of the interesting things he wrote is the exact opposite problem that David has here, is that we have virtually no sandy loam in the farm. It's all heavy clay, and we're very, very wet because in the west we love the wet weather. So that's it. So about 150 years later, my grandfather, Robert Cunningham, he decided to come to Mosgiel Farm with his 28 Ayrshire cattle that he had bought from his father. And he came there to farm 100 acres and decided he wanted to raise his family and have a future there. So the 28 Ayrshire cattle he worked there along with a dairyman and a couple of other members from the local village of Mauchline. And he grew that over time. He met my grandmother, they married, they had 4 children, and just the traditional family farm. It was a mixed farm. He had sheep and a couple of crops, which were very rarely successful, but he had them anyway. And he farmed away until about 1993 when he retired, and my father, also Robert, took over. In 1993, the farm had grown to 80 dairy cattle from the initial 28, still Ayrshires at the time, and the mixed farming, it was sort of dying off. We were starting to stop growing crops, and the sheep were away just 5 years later. So at that time, that was really the time that dairy was changing in Scotland, so all the farms were becoming bigger or getting out, sort of after the demise of the Milk Marketing Board. And Mosgiel was no different. My father, he had increased production every year since he took it on, and things were just growing and growing, stopped the crops, stopped the sheep, and went on to a grass-based system, sort of more traditional in the area. And cattle were kept indoors during the winter. Things were growing and growing, and by the time I was leaving school in 2004, we had the conversation about me coming home, and I think I told my father there was absolutely no way I was going to stand underneath an animal, and I'm not allowed to swear because on the internet you get food on every day. So that was that. I went away to work with my local Mercedes-Benz garage for 10 years. I initially went in as an apprentice, and then became a diagnostic technician, and finally into management. Thoroughly enjoyed my time there, but as the years went on, I thought to myself, was that the right decision, walking away from the farm at the time? And the year that I left Mercedes, it was a bit of a strange one. Life dramatically changed for me. My mother came into the dealership one day and said, look, your father's not well, he's got cancer and he's only got 18 months to live, and we're going to have to get rid of the farm. We're a tenanted farm, so it wouldn't be a case of selling it, we'd just have to walk away from the tenancy. And I thought, that'd be a real shame, and I'd really thought about it for the past 10 years that I would like to do something. I decided, make the jump, let's go home and see what we can do. When I went home, I had actually moved away from the farm 5 years before, and what I found was quite astonishing. What I remembered was a 100-cow Ayrshire cow herd, where they were grazing the pastures in the summer and they were inside during the winter. And what I went home to were a mixture of Ayrshire and Holstein cattle. They were producing an awful lot of milk. They were producing between 30 and 35 litres per day per animal. And they were being more tended to be kept inside, with the grand plan of my father having to keep them inside full time. So when I questioned him about that, he said, look, I can't produce milk for the cost I'm getting, or for the price I'm being paid on the grass-based system. It's just not working for me. We can't rent more land because it's not available. We can't increase numbers. We have to maximise what we can get from each cow. So while my father was unwell, we just continued with that system. The following year after coming back, the cows were actually housed for 365 days of the year because it was quite a wet summer. And we just walked away. My father died in September, and not knowing any better, we just kept going. And unfortunately, the same month my father died, the milk price collapsed. So we were being paid 28 pence per litre when my father died, and within 6 months we were being paid 15 pence. So we were losing £10,000 a month. 6 months after that, we were being paid 9 pence. And we had the phone call from the bank manager to say, sorry Bryce, your business is no longer sustainable. We're going to have to stop your accounts and relook at your whole business plan. So at that particular time, obviously the cows were indoors, we were pumping out a lot of milk with 125 animals milking. And I thought, it's not really what I remember my childhood being, it's not what I really wanted to do, and the bank manager's telling me you're not doing it anymore anyway, so it was time for change. So I started looking about, and the thing that annoyed me the most was the price we were being paid, so I'll just start talking about it now. So what we decided to do was, we decided that we would stop supplying the supermarkets and we would start supplying the milk that we had directly to the customers. So we installed a pasteuriser from some savings that I had from Mercedes, and we started pasteurising a little bit of milk, and we started working from there. So the milk that we produce is a non-homogenised milk from Ayrshire cattle. the amount of milk we were selling wasn't able to justify everything we were trying to do, so unfortunately we had to sell half of our herd. We sold most of the Holstein cattle at the time, and although we were tenant farmers, we did own a tiny little bit of land which was sold as well just to try and get the bank offer back. So at that time we reduced our way down to 30 animals. We started selling all the milk directly, and we just were looking for a more sustainable future for the farm. So where did the idea come from for selling directly? When the milk price collapsed, being a little highly strung as I always am, I decided to find a group of farmers that felt the same way as me, and we would go and tell the public about the issues of the dairy industry. So down in the bottom right there, that's our local Asda supermarket. We jumped in a tractor and took it down, 30 of us. We went in and bought all the milk off the shelves. We took it to the front door, gave it away and said, look, there's we can't produce milk sustainably, and believe it or not, we actually ended up in the BBC News the next morning. So it was a bit of quite surreal. And the one lesson I learned from that was when I was speaking to the public out there, speaking to people that I'd never spoken to before, the one thing they kept asking was, oh, so how do we support the farmers? Where do we buy this milk? And I said, well, you can't. There's no dairy in Ayrshire that you can buy there. You've got to go to the big processors, the supermarkets, and hope that they give someone a fair price. And this was before Morrison's had launched a milk for farmers and everybody else jumped in the bandwagon with that. So it really sort of got my creative juices going at the time. Another thing that really annoyed me at that time was, while I was doing research into what happened in the dairy industry, was something that I'd remembered from when the meat scandal happened, when the horse meat was getting to supermarkets, and there was a great big debate about that. And at the same time, I picked up a pizza in a supermarket at one time, I was looking for something quick to eat, and I'd grabbed a pizza and went home, and I looked at the label, and I couldn't believe that the pork in this pizza, they didn't actually know which one of the 3 countries it came from. They just said, it's from one of these countries, and that's pretty much it. And it really annoyed me that we had a European-wide regulation on traceability, but we can't actually get that traceability to the customer. If we can't tell which one of the 3 countries it came from, how do we know it's even pork from what happened at Tesco? So that kind of annoyed me as well. Around about the same time we were doing the sort of the milk trolley challenges, it was also in the papers that the sort of fat revolution was coming. You know, everyone was believing that what we've been told for the past 30 years about eating fat had been wrong. There was a lot of nutrient in fat that we had missed, and a lot of people were challenging the sort of low-fat advice given by various different bodies. And again, that started thinking that as well. And my wife and I, we had our first son as well, so we were starting to start our own family, and when you've got a bank on your back and starting a family, it's not particularly the best place to be. So that was when we decided that was it. We were going to have full traceability. We would let people come to the farm and see what we were doing. We would launch the high-fat milk of our Ayrshire cows directly to the public and bring back the milk of 30 years ago before everything started to go to the massive processors and mega industries. So what we do is we do as little as possible to the milk that we can to try and keep this flavour, keep the fat in it, and keep everything going. But the thing that really surprised me when I started reading into it was what is actually done in the sort of mega dairies and large processing industries. So I came across this on Google, and this is a process flow for these large dairies to try and maximise their efficiency in production. So just to briefly go through it, the raw milk will come in at the top of the chart there. It will flow down through various different processes where the milk will be separated, all the milk coming in will be separated into cream and skim milk. And then the cream will go along and some will be added back to the skim milk to create either whole milk or semi-skimmed, the lowest possible fat content possible, because cream's worth more than skim milk. Then whatever's left will go along to make other products, so you've got butter, you've got yogurt, you've got various other bits and bobs. But by the end of that whole process, what you're getting is a heavily processed product. So even your whole milk is not whole milk, because it's not direct to the cow, it's actually been reduced in fat down to 3.5 or 3.6% fat. And obviously a semi-skim's half the fat of that, and then everything else is processed, homogenised and battered about as much as possible. So the one that I came up with was slightly different. So we managed to basically build this system ourselves. I used the mechanical background of what I learned at Mercedes to put pipes together and make heaters and things. So we're actually able to pump the milk straight from the cow into the pasteuriser, straight from the pasteuriser into the bottle, and then the bottle straight to our customers. So, 5 minutes, thank you. So we can actually get the milk from the cow to our customers within 4 hours, and that's it, heated and chilled as well. So we try and do something like that. So better rattle in here. So obviously it's not just about bottled milk at Bastille. What we're doing is we're trying to do something slightly different. And when I first went down the route of bottling our own milk, we decided that we had to have something completely different. So the first thing I decided was that we were going to ban all genetically modified products to the cows. I'd done a lot of research into genetically modified foods, and there was pros and cons all over the internet, and I just decided, nope, we just cut it out. My grandfather wouldn't have fed them 30 years ago, and I don't want to today. But I felt it wasn't enough, because what I remember is a child running through the woods and getting cut in grains, and the fields been full of grass, and the hedges been full of wildlife. It just wasn't happening anymore. It just seemed to be that a lot of that had went backwards. So we decided that we would become organic producers. So we signed up to SOPA, and that has been probably the most challenging thing I've ever done. It's been very exciting. However, in 2017, when the weather turned against us and we had our wettest year in almost 60 years, it didn't make not having fertiliser very fun. We were trying to feed 80 animals on it. So it has been very challenging, very exciting as well. We are seeing a lot of wildlife coming back to the farm, even though we've only been doing it for 2 years. We've seen a lot of clover coming back into the swards that had been missing for years, and we just seem to have a bit more diversity around about the farm. Obviously, it's an ongoing thing, so we're working away at it. It is all about our cows, or the Mesquite girls, as I like to call them. So they are Ayrshire cattle. They are predominantly grass-fed. During the summer, they only eat grass, only 100% grass, and during the winter, because I'm not very good at making silage yet, we are having to top up with some concentrates to keep them healthy and keep them happy. You'll see in the left picture there, up the back there, that chap's called Endurance. He's our stock bull, and he spends all year with the girls running about, so he's actually due for going to another farm soon. We'll be getting a replacement for him soon, but he's a happy guy. In my passes themselves, as I say, one of the things that did annoy me when I came back to the farm, there seemed to be a lot of lack of diversity in the swards. And the right hand side there, sorry, I should say this is at the edge of a field here, and the right hand side here, this is a part where a sprayer had missed 2 years before this. So my father, he was a great one for spraying docks. He hated docks, and this field sprayed just before I came back. And you can see that 2 years later, there was still an issue in that soil. It still seemed to be sterile for everything other than grass. So you've got a rich, diverse clover sward on the left, and you've got nothing other than grass on the right, so that's what we're trying to fight off. And I'm pleased to say that everything is beginning to get better. Those clover swards are coming back into the fields, and everything is looking a bit more natural, if you like. And of course, I've got a family to look after now. I've got to make sure that if my son does decide to become a lunatic and become a farmer in his lifetime, then it's got to be there for him as well. So that's how it goes. So thank you very much.
Bryce, thank you very much. Fascinating insight there on your journey, and actually it's something that SNH, particularly Francesca and myself, have been engaged with recently, is this move to actually get people drinking real milk again. And fortunately, I seem to be talking about Tyree a lot, but where I live, we now have the opportunity to buy real milk again, so I think it's a very positive move, and thanks for that. We're now going to hear from Lynn Cassells from Lynbreckcroft. Thank you.
Before my time starts, can I just say that I live in probably what I think is most biasly the most beautiful corner of Scotland, but I really wish I lived in Ayrshire so I could buy Bryce's milk. Anyway, thanks for inviting me to come here today. I've got loads of nice pictures, so have a look at them. 2 years ago, my partner Sandra and I brought Lynbreckcroft. How's this work? Pause my time. That's us, yeah. See, I'm a crofter, I don't do this kind of thing. So it's 150 acres of what we call pure Scottishness. It's heathery hill, it's woodland, it's grassland and it's bog. Now, our backgrounds are mainly in conservation land management. We'd worked for the National Trust as rangers and spent some time in the Scottish borders planting new native woodlands on landscape scale ecological restoration projects. The point I want to make is that we'd never run an agricultural business. We'd work with farmers and with livestock, but never had our own. So our vision is simple: to farm with, alongside, as part of nature. Our objectives are to increase diversity, to be healthy and happy, to share our stories, and to make enough money to cover our costs and grow our business. Our team to deliver these objectives is huge. There's myself and Sandra, 23 hens, soon to double to 50. We've got 6 Highland cattle, 3 Oxford Sandy black pigs, a few thousand honeybees, and the existing tree, flora, mammal, invertebrate and fungi life already on the croft. We also have a few sheep arriving tomorrow, for good measure. Our boss is wonderful and all-powerful, but is someone not to get on the wrong side of. That's nature. So when we purchased Limbrec, we had no money and a debt. 2 years on, we're debt-free, with a little money in the bank and a growing business. So here's our guide to farming with nature. Number one, it's all about the soil. The one thing all farmers have in common is that our businesses are directly impacted by the health of our soils. We've decided on a non-input approach. No fertiliser, pesticide, herbicide or lime. Instead, our animals do the soil stuff for us. Carefully planned grazing of a mixed cattle and sheep herd that are moved daily in a group, followed by pasture hens. Keeping animals moving, avoiding damage to the ground, scattering cow and sheep pats as natural fertiliser, eating grubs, eating enough but not too much, and allowing lots of rest time for the ground. That's the ultimate model we're working on and learning more about every day. Everything must build soil. Number two, controversial, it's not all about the money. At present, we don't claim subsidy payment. We're new to the whole basic payment system, and we find that the list of rules and regulations clouds our ability to make our own decisions. But that means we're pushed to be more inventive, to make our money in other ways, to work harder. And there is other grant funding that we have managed to make work for us. We received the Young Farmers Startup Grant. We've used the New Entrants Capital Grant and the Crofting Grant schemes to help restore our old byre and build a new barn. We've accessed forestry and woodland trust grants, all of which we've been able to make work for Limbrec. We're trying to build a business that will wipe its nose and stand on its own 2 feet, but only enter into grant agreements if they are 100% right for Limbrec. Number three, trees are our greatest asset. We have 3 hectares of established woodland, and so far we have planted an additional 23,000 trees and set aside an additional 9 hectares of natural regeneration. In the short term, we have gained. We entered a woodland creation scheme, and with the exception of the deer fence, we did all the work ourselves. The application, the planning, the ground prep, the planting. That meant we got to pay ourselves, immediately adding financial value to the croft on land which was poor in terms of diversity and grazing capacity. It would always have run at a loss. In the long term, we've gained. When established, this will be a new diverse woodland habitat that will provide a large area of protected, sheltered grazing with an abundance of grasses, herbs and tree leaf forage. I may not live to see that, but that's not the point. We've planted 1 kilometre of native hedgerow to provide shelter for ourselves and our grazers, to link habitats and to provide food for birds and insects. And this autumn we'll plant another 5,000 trees in an agroforestry project, one where we'll grow tree fodder and make tree hay. Very simply, trees protect and improve our soils and our animals. In a climate that's becoming wetter and more extreme, they're an essential part of our farm for the future. Number 4, engage, educate and inspire. We are social media junkies, not out of choice, but it's a way we can share with the world openly what we are doing. We spend a huge amount of our time showing people around the croft, from locals who buy our produce to important people in organisations such as this one, the Forestry Commission. The chap in the green jacket there is the conservator for the Highlands and Islands. Woodland Trust, we've got CEO Becky Spate there and Carol Evans, who's head of Woodland Trust Scotland. And the Organic Research Centre, who are based in the south of England, but are still taking an interest in what we're doing. And in the last couple of months, we've done 2 shows for BBC Radio 4. We've held our first training course, and we're working on a number of collaborative projects with national businesses. All of this is exhausting, and it doesn't pay the bills yet. But we feel it's integral to what we do, and we know over time we'll reap social and economic benefits for our business. This has actually already started. And when people come to Limbrec, when they connect with the land and this way of life, it ultimately energises and motivates us to keep going. People want us to succeed. Number 5, mind your language. Language is powerful. What we say can greatly influence others, and not always for the better. In farming and other land uses, the following words are often used: marginal, unimproved, improved, less favoured area, severely disadvantaged area, vermin, pests. We don't think any of these words apply to our land or our extended team at Limbrec. Our flora and fauna in balance provide opportunities, not threats. When things are out of balance, nature will tell us, and we need to be open to that. What we don't do is manage our land or manage nature. We just lose time and money fighting a continuous war we'd always be losing. Number 6, we can do it all. At Limbrec, we have forestry, we have farming, we even have shooting. Because of a lack of natural predators, we hunt deer and rabbits, both of which go into our freezer and into our bellies. We hope to have tourism soon by offering accommodation and farm tours. And this summer, very excitingly for us, we're installing a butchery and food processing facility where we can process, cure and smoke our own produce. In terms of our land, we want biodiversity in bioabundance rather than targeting a handful of species, because that's just not nature's way. Number 7, food is medicine. We live in an age of convenience. Most people have no idea what is in the food that they buy. Most off-the-shelf products are so low in nutritional value that we need to eat more of them, making us gain weight and fill our bodies, our lives, with unknown chemicals that ultimately make us sick. At Limbrec, we think we have healthy animals, eating healthy food that produces healthy meat full of nature's best. We grow as much of our own produce as we can, and we try and stay active. We walk out to feed our pigs twice a day, rather than always jumping on the quad bike. We use a scythe to cut back small areas of rush and scrub, and we fell and chop our own firewood rather than buying it in. All of this does take more time, but we think it's time well spent. And the final in our series, number 8, is we need you. Collaboration, cooperation, and community are not buzzwords to us. They are integral to what we want to achieve. If you like what we do, then we need your support. We need you to share this story of farming with nature, all of these stories. As Wendell Berry says, eating inextricably influences agriculture. That means if you want farming with nature, you need to buy farming with nature. That means more money than convenience meat and veg or milk. But what is it at the end of the day that actually costs you more? So that's a summary of who we are and what we are about at Limbrec. We want to share what it is that we do. We don't want to preach or criticise others. We just want to work hard, enjoy life and live in harmony with our special corner of Scotland that we feel very lucky to call home, and run it as a sustainable business for people and for wildlife. We're just at the start of our journey. Thanks very much.
Lynn, thank you very much. Absolutely fascinating insight to a modern, progressive, forward-looking croft, and I think crofting is quite often seen as something from the past, and your presentation there actually gives the lie to that crofting is a forward-looking, progressive industry. So we're now going to hear from Roger Poulsen from Knockfire. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you, SNH, for the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. I just want to give you a wee bit of introduction to the farm and where we are, our journey that's got us to where we are today and where we would like to go. So Knock is a farm of about 430 hectares, 1,100 odd acres, situated on the south slopes of Knock Hill, about 10 miles north of Huntly in Murray, right on the boundary with Aberdeenshire. Beth, my wife, and I farm the place in partnership, and we have farmed the place since late 1989. We took it over from Beth's parents, and we are the third generation of her family to be farming the place. two previous generations had farmed the farm well, and as has been mentioned, I think, by everybody tonight, soil was at the heart of their philosophy on farming, and soil is very much at the heart of our philosophy on farming. And maintaining soil quality is definitely what good farming to me is all about. In 1989, we moved to the place, having farmed previously a tenanted farm for about 5 years before, and then Beth's father retired and gave us a chance to take it over. About the same time, SNH, or NCC as it was in those days, approached us with a intention to declare part of the farm an SSI, and this was what became known as Sherwood Pastures, which is owned by ourselves and several neighbours, and around about 1990 or so that was designated as such. And that, in many ways, started to change our approach to the way we farmed it. We had a lot of cooperation from SNH and a lot of information by the field officers about why this little bit of land was being declared an SSI. And it really got us starting to appreciate, or it gave me anyway, a bigger insight into the responsibilities that go with land management. The farm today is run as a mixed farm, and it ranges in soil type from peatlands on the Knock Hill, covered in heather, right down to through good loamy soils, down to some poor draining wetlands, which is part of the Sherwood Pastures SSI. So we've a great diversity of opportunities to manage different qualities of land. As I say, today the farm is run as a mixed farm, and we have about 70-80 suckler cows, 400 odd breeding ewes, and grow about 150 acres of crop. In addition to that, we have a livery business and do quite a lot of horse events and training opportunities as well. And we finish all the progeny that we produce. So everything leaves the farm, or pretty well everything that leaves the farm goes for slaughter. The farm has been farmed organically since 2006, and that put a real challenge back into farming for us, and it certainly has been a challenge we have really enjoyed. Around about the turn of or the start of the 90s, we were persuaded to produce a conservation plan for the farm, again funded by SNH at the time, and it was carried out by one of the FWAG advisors, who had recently started with Grampian FWAG, and again, the information that came from that started concentrating our minds on the wider responsibilities that go with farming the place, more than just running a farm. And I think over the next 4 or 5 years, we realised that we weren't just farmers, we actually had a far wider responsibility, and we were managers of that land that was known as Knock, or is known as Knock. And it's a very not an onerous responsibility. It's a real privilege to have that responsibility. And slowly over time, we've realised that the successful management of that land is a really integrated operation, and we have always adopted a holistic approach to this management strategy. Today, I like to think that we run a fairly balanced farm. We have a balance of different breeds of livestock. We have a balance of different activities on the farm. We have a balance in our approach to managing the grass, and I think this balance is the key to successfully managing land. In an earlier life, I was an economist and spent many years, several years, teaching students about all the economic tools we have, like gross margins and profit and loss accounts, etc. But really, I do not believe that we can farm successfully and look at one enterprise in isolation from another. Everything is interrelated, and I think that's part of the problems that farms are built up today, is that they've looked at what they considered to be the profitable side of it and neglected the real benefits of having diversity there. Today, we, as I say, we've farmed the place organically, and we've, in the current situation of the 1,100 odd acres, about half of it is native pastures, woodlands, or what we'd call rough grazings. And the other half is either permanent grass, improved grasslands, or arable land. And in amongst all that, about 250 acres, 300 acres of it, almost a third of the farm, is now woodland and not farmed as such. Some of it will become more grazed woodland in time, but a third of the farm is now down to trees. And we have, over the last 10 years, monitored our carbon situation, and I think we've done an assessment of it 4 times over that period. And the last one was done around Christmas time, just past. And for the first time, we are now at a zero carbon situation. Indeed, we're slightly on the right side of it. And I find that quite an interesting figure, because there we are farming in a really reasonably low-cost situation, medium quality land, farming it organically, a third of the place in trees, and finally we've got to a zero carbon situation. So we buy very little fuel, we buy no fertilizer. Most of the fuel that we heat with is produced on the farm. We have our own turbines, we have our own PV panels, so all these things contribute to it, and finally we've got to a zero situation. So I think that's quite a challenge for the rest of the industry to face. We have been heavily involved in pretty well every conservation scheme that has been on the go since the early 90s, right from the Countryside Premium Scheme, indeed from some of the original conservation projects that were handled by FWAG, North Grampian Conservation Project, and things like this, right through to the current EAG schemes. And we have learnt a lot. We like to think we've had a little bit of influence on the system, and we have become disillusioned, I would say, today. The development of conservation support, to me, is going way down the wrong route. It's become very complicated. It has become far too prescriptive, and I feel today that there needs to be a major rethink of the way conservation support is given to farmers. As organic farmers, greening is something that we can ignore because we are so green anyway. And I like to think that we do run a balanced enough situation that at least is something that we don't have to fall into line with. But the regulations surrounding the current AIC scheme is, and indeed its predecessor, the Rural Priority Scheme, is really, to me, it appears to be designed to make it easy to administer, but very, very difficult for the participants to successfully utilise. And I think one of the bugbears of it is that the operations have become so prescriptive, and there is no recognition of the achievements that have been made. And I really feel we need to think about how we can reward farmers for achieving an objective rather than for going down the route of trying to hit a target and never actually checking that he does hit that target. So who, for instance, goes around and checks that the hedge that the country has just paid for has actually been looked after, and who in 10 years' time goes and looks at that hedge, and who in 10 years' time says to that land manager, you've done a good job there. Nobody does, and nobody says to the guy that pulled out the hedge 5 years later that you shouldn't have done that. And I think one of the classic one that really gets me at the moment, I suppose, is the management of our SSSI. And as I said, the SSI was declared in 1990 odd, and tremendous support from SNH over it. And about 3 years later, maybe 6 years later, the SNH, I think, maybe came up with something called the East Scotland Grassland Scheme. And although when it was initially declared an SSI, we got no money for it, and we were quite happy just to carry on managing it as we were, and that was no problem. The government then offered us money under the East of Scotland Grassland Scheme, which was fine. If you want to offer us money, that's fine, I'm not bothered. And we had to carry on managing it, as we'd managed it since 1926. And I think we had to measure the grass growth in it, which, if you know what rough ground looks like, is just, to me, is absolutely ridiculous. How can you measure the food production from a rush head and a bit of sedge up there, or something that's, it's such a, you look at a scope of land like that and you decide how much, whether or not there's enough production there to feed animals. Anyway, we fell into line with that, and slowly the schemes have evolved, and the grazing requirements of it had to be noted, and it started off being we will put cows down there from May to December, and we'll maybe put, next time I think it was maybe put down 50 cows between May and December at some point, and that's fine. That gave us enough flexibility. The last scheme that came out was that we have to put down X number of cows. I think we settled on 40 cows after the 1st of September, and they must be removed on the 30th of October, or something along those lines. Now, how can you possibly expect to manage something so sensitive and so important to the nation as an SSI by somebody telling us that that's the prescription you've got to settle on? We need the flexibility to decide how we manage it, and SNH put down very able scientists every 4 years to monitor it, and they look at it and they decide how we're doing, and we discuss it. If there's a problem, we'll resolve it. But you've taken, by opting for the options under the 8 scheme, we have lost that flexibility, and the only reason it is like that, as far as I can see, is that as far as the inspectors go, the only way they can monitor what's happening there is to go down and count cows. The thing was never declared an SSI because of the number of cows you kept down there. It was declared an SSI because of the flora that existed on the site, and it's the success of managing that flora that is what the reward should be for looking after that area of land. And I would say the same about the many other options that are being offered, like wetland creation or species-rich grassland creation. All these things, farmers want to do it. Farmers want to learn about it. It is a learning process, and the grants should be there to encourage them to do that. But they need the education, and they need the support to carry out these things successfully. And they don't need a prescription on how to do it. They know best how to do it. All they need to do is agree that that's an objective we want to achieve, and you have to find a way of encouraging them along those lines and keeping them looking after that as time goes on. Okay, it's just a wee hobby horse on it's getting me at the moment, but I think, you know, we have an audience here which is set to look at the changes in the way that we deliver support and advice to farmers in the next few years. We have a fantastic opportunity coming up to make those changes. And I just sincerely hope that we can find ways of rewarding people for doing things rather than telling them or making them stick to a system which, okay, is negotiated at the start, but you must give credit to the ability of the land managers to work out the best strategy forward for their farm, because each place is individual. And the people that farm it probably know more about managing it successfully than a third party, and it's silly in my eyes to carry on paying people when there is no system of coming in and checking at what they said they were going to achieve. They have achieved, and they are looking after. Okay.
Thank you, Roger. I look at the holistic farm there, and perhaps the main part of what I took is perhaps the over-prescriptive regulation that you sometimes have to deal with. And I personally think, as Lynn was suggesting earlier, that until farmers and nature are working in balance and working equitably, that we're not going to reach, you know, the place that we want to be. So thank you for that, and I'm sure it will be discussed later. So we're now going to hear from Tyle de Boards from Whitemuir Estate. Thank you, Tyle.
Recording nature on the farm is what I'll be speaking on. It is something that I got into by mistake. Should have never done it. Anyway, just to introduce the farm first. We're not in La Mancha. There's a very well-known Whitemuir farm just outside Peebles. Organics, brilliant restaurants, organic shop, everything. And people keep saying to me, "Oh, I've been to your restaurant." Well, no, you haven't. Anyway, so we're not organic, we're not perfect, we still use chemicals, but we do try to work with nature on the farm. Not always out of choice. Mixed farm, you can see there's grazing and some arable. The arable is not really enough to have our own tractor and machinery, so we use contractors, so it doesn't make a lot of money. I've got a leaky tractor shed, a very shiny grain shed, and a hay barn, and nowhere to have any stock. So we let the grazing to one of our neighbours. So all that's left for me to do is run tourism, holiday cottages, and in the woodlands and some of their species-rich meadows, we try and do something with nature. And some of it's successful, but the environmental programs have always been quite important to our income because we're not making it from the arable or the grazing. In the lovely days from ESA, you got a form, lots of questions, half of them we didn't answer. It was fun, you got your money. But the forms started to change over time and they became more prescriptive. You had to say for each measure in the ESA programme, what changes of variety of species did you see? Never saw any because we weren't looking for it. So I just ticked no, 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 and that was fine. But I was getting the message, somebody wants to know what we're trying to do here. And so I thought I'd better start seeing what are we doing, is there any changes? I have a background in horticulture, so it was quite easy to start monitoring some of the plants, but I hadn't got a clue about grasses, so I needed to get some volunteer help for that. You just Google who's good in grasses, invite them over, and they come up with a list of what you got. Moths, I invited somebody to come and look at the moths, and they showed me once, and they said, right, now you can do it yourself. So we had to work that. So I was up at 4:30 this morning counting moths on the farm. Some of it's great fun, some of it is a bit boring. We started, well, when I started about 20 years ago at the farm as manager, we had a few orchids and some species-rich bits, and were just grazed by sheep. And the sheep are brilliant at finding any young orchid that's gone before you know it. We changed some things, some for the better. We've now got lots of orchids. We've lost one or two other things. So it's not always as straightforward. Lots of birds. Again, I don't know half these little brown jobs, so we've got people to count them for us. And when I started, we still had curlew nesting on one of the arable fields. Our local badgers sorted them out, so we no longer have curlews. Lapwings, we have a few, about 4 pairs this year, it was 3 last year. We do an inordinate amount of work for the lapwings, and I must admit that I have something to say here about lapwings. When I started in Holland, this was my job working for a neighbour, milking in the middle of the field in a bucket. You never washed your wellies or anything, and you just went up to a cow and milked it where it stood. Those fields were full of lapwings, and at the time in Holland, the first lapwing egg found every year was presented to the Dutch Queen. She had it for her breakfast. After that, the rest of us were allowed to eat as many lapwing eggs as we wanted till a certain date, and then after that date, you had to leave all the lapwings eggs. So the fact that there's very few lapwings left is probably to do something with their stomach. But now at the farm, we have some what we call success stories. There's a pair of oyster catchers that nest on the hayshed roof, and they've been there for 9 years now. The chicks can never get off the roof, so I have to climb on the roof, run around with a bucket, chase them, get the chicks off the roof, and then off they go. In those 9 years, we've never got one chick past that stage. Luckily, they live up to 40 years, I'm told, so we've got another 20 odd years to get it right and breed at least 2 replacements. But it does show the kind of problems that even when you think you're doing well and you have them nesting, it doesn't mean that they're actually succeeding. But both Mr. and Mrs. Lapwing and I know each other very well now, and they come and tell me when I have to bring the chicks off the shed. In winter, we have bird seed plots, we do additional feeding, We have some years we get starlings coming in huge numbers, but when there's snow lying, we have up to 4,000 little brown jobs that come to feeding, and this is our very special feeding method. Wine boxes nailed onto fence posts. It's great. You make sure that they face away from the prevailing wind. The only problem is with that is that when it snows, it's always from the opposite direction, the east, and they all fill up with snow, so you have to keep going around clearing them. But it is very successful, huge numbers of birds, and we have, again, another volunteer to look after the little brown jobs. To see, there's a British Trust for Ornithology man who comes and rings lots of birds, monitors, tells us what's there, tells us what we're doing. We spent ages on skylarks. In the winter we have flocks of sort of 200 skylarks on our stubble, and he's worked out that it's black-headed gulls who keep eating the young on our farm, but we do still have skylarks, which is quite good. One of the other projects we're working with is with the Lothian and Borders Mammal Group. Every spring and autumn they come and count our small mammals. We put out 60 live catch traps, voles, wood mice, all sorts of shrews get into these. They get marked, released, and then for the next few days, especially wood mice, they keep coming back into the traps because they think it's brilliant. There's a little vole there. Voles get quite tame and they'll sit on you and don't want to go. And we have huge amounts of data now. There's more data on small mammals from our farm than anywhere else in Scotland. But what do you do with the data? It doesn't make any sense. There's no rhyme or reason. Sometimes it's explained because there was a lot of snow in the winter. So recording just on its own doesn't produce anything. You still have to try and do something with the data, and that's the challenge that we find. Fungi, the owners quite like edible fungi, and they kept saying to me, why haven't we got any? So I got a mycologist, again, went up on Google. Local mycologist came out to tell me why we didn't have edible fungi. He got out of his car, walked 3 yards and says, there you are, there's edible fungi there. So he then went and looked further, and after a few years we had about 300 species of fungi. And I read somewhere that at 500 species you had a nationally important site. So I thought, well, that's a target. So I kept inviting mycologists from Kew and Edinburgh to host training sessions at our farm, fill our holiday cottages with mycologists. And we're now at over 600 species. And it's, so we're past our 500, we should be nationally important. And so I said, right, what do I do now that we're nationally important? There's nothing that anybody wants to do with our fungi. I could go and kill them all tomorrow with lots of fertiliser. Till there is a Scottish checklist for fungi, nobody's going to look at anything on fungi. So it's a rather frustrating thing that after all the work we've done with fungi, it doesn't mean anything. We have some very nice fungi, and therefore we keep looking after them. We even found a new species on our farm, just on a beach hedge. Had never been found except for in Finland, but a guy who found it in Finland hadn't described it yet, so therefore we can claim it was new. It's now been found in several other places in Scotland, but again, back to Google, found somebody to look at lichens, mosses, liverworts. They have all been recorded now, and we're getting into crazy numbers. We're now at about 1,400 plus species at the farm, and it doesn't always help you making decisions because you know too much sometimes when you decide which bit am I going to plough up. But we keep soldiering on. Moths, all those 251 I've managed to count now, and it's been quite a learning curve. In the beginning I hadn't got a clue what the hell I was doing, but it's been quite interesting, and we make a point of tweeting about moths and other things. So if you like moths, follow us on Twitter. And while we're on Twitter, I was sort of seeing things about things happening in Brussels, about the way some people were thinking that the future should be, and it's this result-based agri-environment schemes. It's nothing new. It's been trialled in all sorts of countries: Scandinavia, Germany, Holland, Greece. For about 20 years this has been going on. But it is looking, I mean, if you listen to Michael Gove, there's ScotLink came out with research about a week and a half ago saying that 77% of Scots want farmers to be paid for doing things for nature. So it is a real thing, and the bit that Roger might be pleased with is the bottom bit. Farmers are free to decide how to manage the land and livestock. No prescriptive dates, but farmers take a risk. So it's not without its challenge. There's 3 European Union funded pilots at the moment, one in England, one in Romania, and the very obvious combination of Spain and Ireland. The Romanian one is very much for small hay plots, low impact machinery or hand cutting, but some of it is still very relevant, and I think, Lynn, when you were talking about some of the things you're trying to do, the Romanian examples of this mosaic farming is very much like what happens in some of the crofts in this country. But again, see what the Romanians are saying at the bottom: prescriptive mowing dates are not good for biodiversity. What Roger was saying is very true. In England, it's run by Natural England and the Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority. There is both bird seed plots on sort of WADA projects, and there is species-rich projects, and there is a wealth of information on both Twitter and Facebook, and if you look at Natural England and Yorkshire Dales websites, tons of stuff. And one of the things that the Natural England and Yorkshire Dales has come up with, which I found was quite interesting, is that where the farmers were doing birdseed plots beside insect plots, because this new system pays you for results, farmers were trying to, or tending to spend more chemicals, because you have to get a huge crop to get your bonus. So something there needs tweaking. This is one of the Irish farmers' examples. You can see there, score 10 out of 10, you get a high payment rate. The 7 out of 10 drops quite dramatically. So there is a push for getting results in these systems. In the Netherlands, a lot of the egg schemes are done in huge cooperatives. There's 40 big cooperatives, and not all of it is perfect, but it does mean that there's a lot less government employees doing paperwork. It's actually the cooperatives getting paid to do the work. It's always better if the farmers get the money than the government. Yorkshire Dales, Natural England and the European Union have been absolutely brilliant giving me information. I could speak for another 2 hours with the amount of information I've had for them. Sadly, I'm not allowed to. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Time. That takes me back to my ESA days, and I can remember going through a similar progression as you, looking at my croft and wondering what was I going to record, and it was pretty much nothing. But after a while, you are pushed to develop a dialogue, and it was interesting, the story over the years of the ESA. Thank you very much for that. Ladies and gentlemen, we're now going to have a short, Kirsten, 5 or 10 minute comfort break, and we'll come back in here when we have a panel discussion with questions and answers. And thank you very much for your attention and your kindness this morning. And thank you to our speakers.